If you live in Auckland and work for a tech company or a startup, we'd love to meet you on September 1st for a very special tech-focused power session where you'll join 15 other women in your industry to build leadership capabilities, overcome challenges, and make tangible progress towards your career goals. Find out more at hello@powrsuit.com. Welcome to Power Up, the podcast that uncovers the unique challenges women leaders face today. Join your hosts Nat and Kristen as we dive into the tough topics and provide actionable insights you can apply right now. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes.
Hello, thanks for listening. Today, we are looking at how to set and enforce boundaries to save your sanity. And we are doing this by immediately breaking one of our boundaries, which is recording this at 6:03 p.m. at night, when I think both of us would rather be watching not the Tour de France, but something on Netflix and drinking beer and wine. So we've stuck with the beer and wine to somewhat enforce our boundary.
Yeah, we're not very great with boundaries, are we?
I don't know, I'm not.
No, I don't think I am. I think I probably like to think I set them, but is it maybe the enforcement is the issue?
That was the real light bulb moment for me, that I am very good at setting boundaries, as are you, I'm sure, but I didn't realize there were two parts to it, which is the enforcing of them, and I was shockingly bad at that, and still am not great, but now I know about it, I can change my behavior a bit.
When you start to think about boundaries and all the signs that signal you might have lowered your boundaries, I feel as though I have healthy relationships and a great partner and great partnership with you, and so everything feels great. However, when I started to read about boundaries, I actually haven't recognized that my time is valuable. And so I haven't set boundaries around my time, and I give a heck of a lot away for free of my time.
I wonder as well, for me, I very early on, before I'd understood and learnt the word boundaries and dug into what it means and how to set and enforce them, the experiences I'd had of people setting boundaries were often not nice experiences. They were people who would just say, and we've talked a bit in the past about no as a complete sentence, but people who were so protective of their time that they would almost let the team down, which sort of goes against my values.
Yes.
Like I'm quite a collaborator, as we both are. We're team players and we believe we are stronger together. And so I think my unofficial introduction to them was people that I don't actually think were setting boundaries. I think they were just opting out of what I would consider a good relationship.
I was just going to say that, and or poor communicators. So either way, they got to fix themselves.
Yeah. Well, I think it gave boundaries a bad name in my head. And
Yeah.
when I've actually gone on to learn about them, I've realized and really am trying to pay more attention to setting good boundaries.
Yes.
And really ensuring that I am able to be there for the people I want to be there for.
Because no one wants to be a no person, and we have spoken about this in how to say no and actually how to say it professionally, because we don't want to be seen as no people. However, there are some really nice and professional ways to put it so that you're not viewed in that camp and lumped with people that are genuinely just saying no because that's what they start with.
Yeah, and a really good friend of mine, Rach, often talks about it in context of put your own oxygen mask on first, which I think often in the past I've thought boundaries might be a very selfish thing, and now I've completely reversed my thinking and I realize it's so selfless, because there is only so much of you to go around, and if you don't put your own oxygen mask on first, you are useless to everyone. So boundaries are actually one of the most selfless things you can do, because it's what protects your ability to be there for the people you care about and do the things you care about.
I think if Kyle, my husband, were listening to this, he would really appreciate it, because all I can remember as a tired family with hangry kids, and you walk in the house and we still have our work clothes on. We might have just picked up the kids from wherever we shipped them out to so that we could both have careers, and everyone's tired and hungry, and I invariably stay in my work clothes and get straight to getting the kids dinner, because that is top priority to reduce my stress levels, because they're animals. And where's Kyle? He's changed like out of his clothes. He's in the shower, and this is like a true partner in life. But hearing you say that Kyle's like, oh yeah, I'm just putting my oxygen mask on.
I was actually going to say, speaking of Kyle, that man has no boundaries. I heard him say no to getting a dog. And I heard him in the car this morning at 5 o'clock in the morning or whatever time it was. Do you know?
Well, he set the boundaries, but he couldn't enforce them because I really
like
wanted a dog. But he does put his own oxygen mask on first. But let me tell you about me setting a boundary this week. I kind of was thinking about my time and how much of it I give away for free. And this in particular is a startup business in Australia that charges people 3,500 Australian dollars to be part of this program, 6-week program. They get access to all sorts of interesting mentors and talks and everything. And guess who these mentors are? People like me. And they come after you and they're like, do this good thing and use all your time for free. And normally, because I said yes to them last year and I mentored an incredible woman doing a business in New Zealand, and that was fabulous and I loved the give back. However, this year I'm like, no. They came at me with an email this week and I was like,
at you.
They came at me with the whole like, if you really care about diversity in the startup ecosystem, you're going to do this. And I was like, nah, I'm going to force my boundary. I am giving away enough time right now.
Yeah, and I think, and that's actually a really great example, because if you were getting something out of that you found valuable, like for example, we do often still go and talk to organizations for free and do a bunch of stuff for free, but we are building a brand and a community at the moment, so we get something back from that, or it's something we really, really care about. But there is that feeling that I think if you're anything like me, we're all quite used to, which is that feeling of, I don't really want to do this, I don't really have time to do this, but yet I feel this massive internal pressure to say yes, to give to people, even though I'm slightly resentful when I do it.
This is a for-profit business, though. Let's not forget. Like, they're building a business off the backs of people volunteer hours. Like, yeah. I find that really strange.
But we will reverse all that for anyone who would like to volunteer to help us.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, there's always, when you are doing things for a larger audience, there's always brand building, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, no, that is, and it's funny, and I've often talked about it in a personal context of the number of times you say yes to helping someone out and then you turn up and you're the bad guy because you actually are resentful and you don't want to be there, and it doesn't really matter what they do, you secretly are annoyed with them, and that is so unfair when you do that to people.
Well, I'm going to give you multiple examples of that later, because that's where I'm guilty of. But
I am so guilty of it right now. I'm trying to cut down, like with everything at Powrsuit. This is not about being immediately perfect. It's about gaining that awareness and really trying to make small changes, which I think I personally have been working on for the last few years when it comes to boundaries.
Boundaries are expectations and needs that help you feel safe and comfortable in your relationships. Expectations and relationships help you stay mentally and emotionally well. Learning when to say no and when to say yes is also an essential part of feeling comfortable when interacting with others.
I love it. And I think that one really resonates with me, because I used to not understand the concept of teaching people how to treat you. So I thought the more you gave to people, the more they'd magically give back. And that probably blew up quite a few relationships in my life, when instead they went, great, I'll take more, which was my fault and not theirs. And I now realize that, because if you keep giving without boundaries, why would anyone question it? I mean, you're a lunatic, which I have been in past life. So we should talk about the two parts: setting boundaries, which in all honesty to me is the easiest part, but there are a few mental barriers, blockers to doing that. And then the second part is enforcing them, which in my opinion is the really hard part. So,
are you a people pleaser?
I would never define myself as a people pleaser, but I think I am. And the reason, and I was talking to my girlfriend about this the other day, that the equation that runs through my mind when someone asks me to do something is, are they going to get more happiness than I'm going to get frustration from this? So I studied philosophy at university for a while, and so overall the outcome is great for the world if I do something. And it's only just occurred to me that is a terrible equation to use for deciding what to do. We have to start with ourselves. So I think I am a people pleaser in the sense, and I wouldn't put it down to that, but I would put it down to, I've got a flawed equation for deciding the outcome of the things I choose to do.
I would automatically start with it, yes, because I'm Canadian, diplomatic, yada, yada. But I think two things, which I never want to part with. And the first is that I am generous, and I will always be generous, and including my time. There are just going to be seasons where I cannot give it away as freely. So I'll always be generous. And the second is I'll always be kind. I actually like being kind to people, and I like to have great relationships, even with random strangers. So I don't know if that's people pleasing. Like I wouldn't say that I'm what do they call it? Where you're like a
pushover?
Pushover.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't say I'm that, but I would prefer to keep the peace. I'm also a peacemaker. Like I'd rather just have peace and not conflict.
Yeah. But I agree with you. I think that term people pleaser is probably a fixed mindset term, because I think in different situations, like when it comes to my family, I do an awful lot to please them and sometimes get resentful about it. I'm a people pleaser. But in a lot of other situations, I think both of us are very good at knowing what we're happy to do and not do. So,
yeah.
I actually really, again, love that example, because I think generosity is actually a key part of what a lot of us identify as being. And I just hate the idea of boundaries feeling like a thing that stops that, because if you get joy out of doing stuff, you don't have to set boundaries on that. It's actually, you get to decide which boundaries you set around what you want to do.
Well, I like, when I did a little bit of research on this, to think of boundaries as protection, which I know is ridiculous, because obviously if you think of boundary, you're keeping someone out or someone in, and you're protecting yourself from that. And so I like the idea, if you actually switch it in your head to going, when you're putting a boundary in place, you're protecting what? You're protecting your time. Maybe you're protecting your values, so that you're being asked to do something that doesn't quite sit right with you and actually conflicts with one of your, what you hold dear. It could be, I don't know, climate change. People want to go jaunt off to Europe, and that makes you uncomfortable. I mean, sorry, but I would like to jaunt off to Europe. That would align with my values of adventure.
But criminal.
Yeah, so protecting your time, your values, and your well-being. These are all things that I think if we start to think when we're being asked to do something, or we're put in a position to say yes, just to think quickly, do I need to protect my time here, my values here, my well-being? Do I know the outcome of this ultimately is going to make me frustrated and increase my anxiety and stress level? So I like thinking of it at that level. I think it's going to help me.
And I think one of the things that I've noticed ever since I started learning about boundaries is my gut lets me know the minute someone asks something. And one of the things that I find, and I think we talked about this the other day, that thing where someone goes, "Are you free this Saturday?" And you're like, "Well, I'm free if we're going to go out to the movies or hang out, but I'm not free if you want me to move your house." And you get that feeling in your gut of like, I don't want to say yes. And I am very aware of that feeling, and so now I try really hard to stop and go, okay, so I'm not a F yes, that's what they call it. If it's not an F yes, it's a no. We won't swear on this podcast. Then I can say, okay, thank you for asking. I can ask what it's for, or I can say, can I get back to you? Because often it's that in the moment you need the words to say.
Yeah.
And for me, it's often, I'm not sure yet, I'll take a look at my calendar. And that is a nice way to ease out of the situation. I'm a huge fan of honesty, and I think it's absolutely fine to say no on the spot if you want to. But sometimes you're like, I've just been asked this request. I actually can't put anything further than a gut feeling right now. So I'm going to give myself a minute to think about, do I want to do it or not?
I think I need to use that as a tactic, because I will, at the time, probably want to do that. Do you want to have lunch? Do you want to have coffee? Do you want to connect? I really genuinely love connecting. But I say yes, and then I feel like it's a post-COVID thing. What's happened is I've gotten really comfortable in my routine at home, and I can get a lot of work done at home.
It's because she has a dog now.
Yeah, I have to walk my dog twice a day. But it gets me out, can I just say? Six-pack goals.
That's great.
Six-pack goals on track. Well, not really, but anyway. I feel like disrupting my flow. There's no parking in our city, so either I have to plan, and when you plan these video calls and you have a coffee in town and you have so many, that's my fault. I'm can't figure out how to plan my life, so that I have to somehow figure out, oh shoot, I only have enough time to drive in, and then there's literally no parking, so you're circling for 30 minutes and then you're resentful and you're like, why did I say yes to this thing? So I somehow need to figure out a better plan of like, is it I have a day of meetings in town? is that I just say, look, can we just do video instead? Would that be okay for now? To 90%
It is
of them?
funny, eh? I think it's the optimist thing, and we find this in a lot of our power sessions, that often we overcommit because we're optimists and we want to do all the things. And we have some great articles about this, Kristen, by the way, about calendar management and managing time.
But that doesn't tell me, do I spend a day in town?
Yeah.
Or do I spread it
We'll
out?
write some. This is a great topic. Great content, great content. But I agree. I often will agree to do something. And this is actually a tactic that I've used recently because I did an experiment in my life where I used to be a big excuses maker, and I found excuses from other people really irritating. And that whole, you agree to go out with a bunch of people or a friend, and you just kind of know at the last minute they're going to cancel. And it's so frustrating because you're like, I've put in the time and I've planned my life around this, and I kind of know that they're not going to be honest with me and they're just going to let it drop. And I wasn't guilty of that, but I definitely would tend towards that. And now I am much more comfortable, even at the last minute, or as soon as I know, which I think is really respectful, as soon as I know I'm looking forward on a Monday, I'm looking at my calendar and going, this week is mayhem. That's when I get in touch with someone and say, I'm really sorry, this week is this, or I'm just really not feeling my best self today. I'm not going to be able to bring the energy that I want to bring to this. And honestly, for me, 100% of the time, I just got positive feedback from people who are probably relieved that finally someone's telling them why they're not turning up. I do not use that tactic a lot because I am a big fan of you stick with your plans.
Yeah.
But there is something in there that we often use, and I think when we come to enforcing our boundaries, we can talk about it, but there's something in there that we're so afraid of letting people down that we actually doubly let them down by being fake about it.
But I actually think it's also the optimist thing. If you genuinely want to do something, but your energy levels can't allow for it, the inconvenience of it all can't allow for it, that is a thing. And so you're right in that maybe we just need to get a little bit real. And our action for how to set boundaries is to make sure we're really clear on the boundary itself and why. Like, what is it that we're protecting? So it could be that if we know our energy levels are low, we have to spend extra effort this week protecting our time. So anything that comes at us that is going to take that should be a sign just to stop and think, and maybe to go, let's not be super optimistic.
Yeah. And I actually like that even down to one more tangible level of, I quite often can look at my calendar now and go, if I'm out 3 nights a week, I'm starting to get into endurance mode, not enjoyment mode. And so I can start to go, oh, 3's my max. And if it's 3 nights in a row, I'm out. Like, I can't do that. So I've started to try and...
I'm pretty much, if I'm not on my couch by 7 p.m. every night, like, I can't even imagine being out 3 nights a week.
Oh, I mean, I can do 5, but that's a stretch. But I think that's what I've started to learn as well, is I know that. So I can say to someone, yes, I'd love to meet up with you, but I have to be home by 7 because I'm going to be tired that night. And then they can make the decision for themselves. But I think we actually do have our calendars to look at to figure out what are the patterns we see that maybe is something we should look at when setting a boundary.
And it could be, if we're asked to do something, it could be, I would love to connect with you. Just the next month or 2 are so crazy. Can we touch base again in a couple months or something?
And I've started doing that as well, where we're
yeah.
booking a lunch 2 months out because
great.
everyone's busy. And then the other thing I really love about that is you book it out and you go, it's just a starting point. When we're all going to check our calendars and we can move it, but if we set it, we'll probably be more likely to do it. And you know the ones that you're like, oh, I'm setting it because I don't really want to do it. Don't set it.
Don't set it. Well, let's talk about enforcing them then. This is the hard bit for most. Enforcing them is tricky when it's a power dynamic involved. So it could be that a superior is asking you to do something. It could be that someone really important in a position of power is asking you to do something, or perceived importance. It could be, I don't know, like your energy levels are low. Now, what I think of with kids and battling my son, I remember walking into, I don't know, a store, and he wanted me to buy him something. And there's always this thing of like, oh my gosh, if I don't do this, is there going to be a temper tantrum, and this is really difficult. So actually I stopped going into sports stores for a couple of years with my son because I could not handle him asking me to buy him another ball. Like, this kid always had to have a sports item. So we actually, for years, I was like, that was my boundary in enforcing it. But when you're tired and your kids are, you're trying to get them to not watch TV or screens, like, once in a while there's times where you just give in because it's too hard. Your energy levels are too low.
But I do actually like the rest of that for the enforcing boundaries, because one part of that is consequences. And I really like that idea of, if you keep behaving like this in a sports store, we will not go into a sports store, and then you don't go into the sports store. And that is, I mean, that is a really, really great way of enforcing a boundary. And I think what you say about the power dynamics is true. So the reason we talk about enforcing boundaries being equally, if not more hard than setting them, most people are too scared to set boundaries because we deep down know that people won't respond well. And that's backed up by this amazing book that I read, Set Boundaries, Get Peace, I believe. And I think they listed the 8 separate responses to boundary setting, and 7 of them were negative. 7 of them were trying to get you to break your boundary. And this is something that we all do. So we know that setting a boundary is probably not going to be a really smooth path for us. So we don't do it. However, I do love that when you're talking about that power dynamic thing is, and this has come up from agencies a few times, people who work in agencies, where they're like, the clients still need the work done. So it's great to be like, I can't do it tonight, but someone has to. So should we dig into a little bit about how do you deal with that?
I am a huge fan of being a team player. And when there is a deadline, I love pulling together and getting the deadline done, or having this above and beyond for the client, or the work needs to be done. However, if it's a common occurrence, it is the result of poor management. They're either taking on too much work, they're not project managing well enough. It's a resource problem, it's a leadership or management problem. So you could sit and analyze that and figure out what it is and have discussions. We often at Hatch, if we had to have a late night for the odd launch of whatever, we'd make sure those people didn't come in the next morning. Like, there's always got to be a bit of a trade-off, I think, for well-being.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that expectation coming from the world of startups, that it's a 9 to 5, it's just out the window. There is, and I think that's probably the case with a lot of businesses. And I so agree with you that there are going to be times, and hopefully it's something that you've spoken about at work, that in this office there will be the odd late night, or there will be the odd this. Do you agree to that? And you have actively agreed to it.
Correct.
If it's sprung on you, that's a problem. And then if it's sprung on you too many times in a row, that's when that's not an anomaly. That's our work is actually from 8 till 10. And again, you can agree if you want to work there. Yeah. And one of the enforcing of the boundaries is, I can't work in this environment if I have to work 12-hour days every day. And you have the opportunity to walk away from that, or talk to your managers about, if we're going to be doing these 12-hour days, what are some things that we can drop in order to get them down to 9-hour days?
Yeah.
Or what prioritization do I need to work on? What time management skills do I need to work on? Or are we actually just taking on too much work and there's a disconnect between sales and doing?
Yeah.
And those are conversations. That's all boundaries.
Yeah.
And it's a conversation.
You will set your boundary, you'll try and enforce it, and people will try and push back. As you've noted, 7 out of 8 times, the reactions won't be great. And I think there's a couple of things we can do in response to this, is actually, first of all, recognize that their reaction probably isn't 7 out of 8 times. It's probably not going to be great, but it's actually not our problem. Like, that is a normal human reaction. It is a sign of a human not getting what they want, which is a disappointing thing. We've all been there, right from the age of 2 when we didn't get the thing, and my son at the sports shop. So that is a human reaction. It's learned, it's habitual, and recognizing that it's not us, it's them.
It's things like negotiation. What if we moved it another hour? Would you do it? Pleading, and that guilt tripping of, but I really need your help. I need this. Anger is often a big one of, I can't believe you won't do this for me. My favorites are PASAG, oh, well, I'm not inviting you out for a coffee, or whatever it is to make you recognize that they are not happy with you, or ignoring it. And this has happened to me a lot, where you set a boundary and then the person almost acts like you never said it and keeps charging through.
Yeah, I agree. And the second point was to teach people how to treat us. And if we continue to enforce it, if they're good people and they're understanding, they will learn to stop pushing. But one thing I was thinking about when you were saying all those points, and I don't know if this fits in the setting or enforcing, probably in the setting, is I've had to cut people that are emotionally takers in my life, and they're really lovely people. But I know that when they want to meet, it is just me giving, and they take and take. And all of a sudden, I feel resentful when I meet with these people because I feel drained. And one of my great friends, Laura in Canada, who we speak every day, I would just say that's the opposite. Like, it might be that the calls fluctuate, like she will dump all of her stuff on me, but I know that either on that call or the next day, it's me dumping all of my
over
stuff.
The long term,
yeah,
right?
there's
It
this give-take
balances.
relationship.
Yeah.
And so we both win. And I know that I've had to cut people in my life. They don't recognize it, but there's this selfishness in humans, and maybe they just don't have high EQ. But yeah, I've had to cut those people. So maybe that's setting.
And that is I would say that's a setting a boundary, but it's
Yeah.
an interesting one because I think that's a case study of, theoretically, you should say, I don't want to keep talking to you if you keep dumping on me. And that's an option. And you can probably articulate that really nicely.
I've just ghosted them, to be fair.
And yeah, I wouldn't call it a ghost. I would call it a slow fade.
That
because
slow
I think
fade.
That is another method of communication when
Yeah.
you're like, I'm just not as available. And it's like not perfect, but it's close enough.
Totally. I pointed at you because that's exactly what it is. It's a slow fade, and I just get on doing other things.
And sometimes people, if they've read Powrsuit newsletters, will maybe ask you for some feedback.
Yeah.
I've had people ask me for feedback before and say, what was it? And you get really brave and you say, I just feel like I can't be there. And I've started to say this to people too, is I don't think I'm in a position to help you with this, because sometimes the problems as you near your 40s get bigger and bigger, and you suddenly find yourself being like, I don't feel equipped for this.
Yeah.
I am terrified I'm going to put you wrong, and I can't be here for you in any way other than I'm going to give you a hug or listen to you vent or whatever, but I can't help with the rest of it. And that's another boundary, because you can start to really get dragged down.
That was taking on other people's work article, and that is, what is it that you're being asked, and how to put, what bucket do you put it into.
And that's a boundary as well, as I'm just here for this thing. So some tips for enforcing them. I'm going to start. We'll go back and forth. Be consistent. And I really like this one because it's almost be consistent. Don't set a boundary and then ignore it or break it. And the examples that I've seen of this is often we will be brave enough to say in an office environment that joke was not funny, that kind of joke, the way you talk about someone isn't okay. And then sometimes then follow up and maybe laugh at it the next time, or don't enforce it the next time. So consistently saying, this is my boundary and I'm going to stick with it, makes your life so much easier. Remind yourself why you're protecting it, and remind the other person, and you're allowed to do that, and you should expect to have to do that.
And my tip was to reinforce the boundary with communications, and clear is kind. And so I've already spoken about this, that clarity and communication is key. We shouldn't beat around the bush. We should just say what we want, ask for what we need. It's okay. It's okay to put ourselves out there and just have real clarity with our communications. And it doesn't have to be angry or mean. It can be polite. It can just be saying, I've mentioned this before. I have to leave at 5. We'll pick this up tomorrow, or whatever.
The third one is consequences, which we did talk about briefly when it comes to your son. Do you use this one much? I don't. I mean, I suppose the slow fade's another example. I kind of feel like in my life, 99% of the time, actually it's resolved by reinforcing it. And people go, oh, that's right. Because we're all busy. We forget what other people's top priorities are. You reinforce it and people go, great, I get it.
I just think there's probably a situation in the workplace, and this could be microaggressions, or it could be someone is being really unhelpful and making you feel like crap, whatever. And usually this could fall in the microaggressions or psychological safety. But that is a boundary. You should feel emotional safety in your relationships, at work as well. And so that is where the consequences might be, that you go and escalate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And there's probably been a few times in my life that I should have done that, but I didn't. So while we leave you now, sign up to our newsletter. Please sign up to our newsletter. We get so much lovely feedback from people about the tips we have in there, the small actions you can take every week. While you're at it, subscribe to this podcast or follow this podcast, and chuck us a 5-star review while you're at it. Even if you want to give us a 4 or 3 or 2 star, just make it a 5. That's probably our 2 actions that would make a real difference to our lives.
Stay in touch and go and set and enforce those boundaries. And we look forward to chatting with you next week.
Bye.
Bye.